The laughter erupted the moment Captain Ava Lawson entered the briefing room. 20 elite pilots, all men, turned their attention to her, sizing her up as she silently made her way to the back row and took her seat. Commander Reynolds continued outlining the mission, completely unaware of the storm that had just walked in. When she questioned his approach, Lieutenant Mills smirked, saying, "My sister flies commercial too." They had no idea who they were dealing with. Have you ever seen someone underestimated, only to surprise everyone? If you believe in powerful, raw stories like these, subscribe and help us share the quiet legends among us, capable of extraordinary feats. The pre-dawn briefing room aboard the USS Intrepid hummed with energy. The legendary Jolly Rogers, Strike Fighter Squadron 103, settled into their seats, preparing for the mission ahead. Steam rose from coffee cups, and the Persian Gulf stretched dark and endless through the narrow windows. Its horizon was just beginning to hint at dawn. Commander Jack Maverick Reynolds, 42, stood at the briefing table, arranging tactical maps with precision. 2 decades of naval aviation had earned him leadership of the squadron and a reputation for brilliance in the air. Though politically, he was somewhat disconnected. "We've got a new transfer joining us this morning," Reynolds said, eyes focused on the maps. "Orders directly from Washington." Lieutenant Commander Thomas Rocket Vance smirked. "Another diversity initiative?" "Watch your mouth, Rocket," Reynolds responded without much conviction. "All I know is Captain Lawson is coming from some desk assignment. The Admiral wants her integrated immediately." The room continued their banter until the door opened. Captain Ava Lawson entered. Her flight suit plain, no patches, no call signs, nothing but her name, rank, and the American flag. She carried a slim folder and a worn leather logbook under her arm. The room fell silent instantly. Reynolds barely glanced up. "Captain, take a seat in the back. We're discussing Operation Shadowfall." Ava nodded, betraying no emotion, and made her way to the back. The only noticeable detail was the faint burn scar trailing from beneath her collar up her left side, but no one paid attention. "Gentlemen," Reynolds continued, emphasizing the word, "this mission has approval from the highest levels. We're extracting 3 intelligence assets from the Korma Valley, contested airspace, mountainous terrain, limited visibility, and probable surface-to-air defenses." As Reynolds detailed the operation, Ava remained silent, occasionally scribbling notes with sharp precision. Her eyes narrowed once when Reynolds mentioned the target extraction zone's elevation and surrounding terrain. "The extraction corridor requires precision flying at low altitude through these mountain passes," Reynolds said, tracing the route on the map. "I'll lead Alpha Team through the primary approach. Joker, you'll command Bravo as our backup if Alpha faces resistance." Lieutenant Dave Joker Mills nodded confidently. "Yes, sir. We can handle it." For the next 20 minutes. The room filled with questions as senior staff proposed adjustments, modifications, and tactical options. Reynolds took some ideas, dismissed others, but Ava remained quiet, her face unreadable. Finally, Reynolds turned to her, a challenge in his eyes. "Captain Lawson, since Washington thinks we need your perspective, any thoughts from your experience?" The room fell into a hushed silence. All eyes turned toward her. Ava met Reynolds' gaze steadily. "Yes, Commander. Your approach through this valley creates a significant vulnerability. The prevailing winds at that altitude, combined with the mountain configuration, create unpredictable turbulence. You'll need to adjust your entry vector by 13 degrees to avoid updraft complications." Reynolds' expression hardened. "Captain, those flight patterns were calculated based on actual combat experience in similar terrain. How many combat flight hours do you have?" "My record should be in my transfer file, sir." Ava replied calmly. "Humor me," Reynolds pressed. "I have sufficient experience to recognize a dangerous approach when I see one, Commander," she said firmly. The room seemed to grow colder. Reynolds straightened his posture. This isn't a training simulation or diversity initiative, Captain. These are real missions, with real lives at stake. We don't have room for theoretical feedback from someone who's never flown in a combat theater. Several pilots smirked. Lieutenant Mills leaned forward. My sister flies commercial too. But we're talking about combat missions under fire. A whole different world. Laughter rippled through the room, but Ava remained composed. Her attention sharpened when the intelligence officer mentioned the Serpent's Tongue area. Satellite imagery suggests they're positioning mobile SAM sites along these ridges, the officer said, pointing to a narrow passage. Ava glanced at the coordinates and back to her notes. It was a small movement, but Reynolds caught it. Something to share, Captain, he asked dismissively. Those coordinates have poor satellite reliability due to magnetic anomalies in the rock composition, Ava said quietly. Ground confirmation would be advisable. Reynolds laughed. Thank you for the science lesson. I'll note that in my W. With 1,500 flight hours and 3 combat deployments, including in this region, I've never encountered these magnetic rocks. More laughter followed. Reynolds continued, I'll personally lead the most critical phase through the narrowest section here. We've designated it Widowmaker Pass for obvious reasons. Ava's pen stopped moving. She looked up slowly. Any other questions before dismissal? Yes, Ava said, her voice cutting through the room. Who authorized this mission profile? The room went silent. Reynolds stared at her. Admiral Harrison himself. Ava's eyes remained steady. Problem, Captain. With all due respect, Commander, Ava said firmly. This approach will get your pilots killed. The room was still, the words hanging heavily in the air. Reynolds' face flushed with anger. And you're basing this assessment on what exactly? Your vast experience flying a desk. Ava held his gaze for a long moment. Then, without saying another word, she reached into her flight suit and pulled out the worn, leather-bound flight log she had carried in. She placed it deliberately on the table and opened it to the first page. The room watched as she revealed an official military identification page. Captain Avalon, Phoenix Lawson. Special Operations Aviation Detachment. Official stamps and security clearance markers, many higher than Reynolds' own, lined the margins. Reynolds scoffed. But his confidence visibly wavered. We all have our paperwork, Captain. Yes, sir, Ava replied calmly, flipping through the pages. Each page contained flight records from classified operations. Many redacted, but some visible enough to suggest missions the pilots in the room didn't have clearance to know about. As she continued turning pages, small photographs fell out, Ava with various special forces teams, receiving medals in private ceremonies, standing beside aircraft with unfamiliar markings. The room fell silent. 246 combat flight hours, Ava stated matter-of-factly. For different aircraft types, including the one you're flying today. Specialized high-altitude, low-visibility extraction qualifications. She flipped another page. And 7 successful missions through the Korma Valley, including 3 through what you're calling Widowmaker Pass. Lieutenant Mills leaned forward, eyes wide. That's not possible. Nobody's ever. I've made it through 3 times, Ava corrected him quietly. And lost good pilots on 4 other attempts. The approach you're suggesting was tried during Operation Blacklight. We lost 2 aircraft. Reynolds' face went pale. You're Phoenix, the pilot from Blacklight. The door opened then. And Admiral Harrison stepped inside, causing everyone to snap to attention. At ease, the Admiral said, his eyes finding Ava. I see Captain Lawson has introduced herself properly. Sir. Reynolds began, his voice trembling, there must be some mistake. This is Captain Lawson. She specifically requested no announcement of her record or previous assignments upon transfer. The Admiral interrupted. She's the only pilot who's ever made it in and out of that valley alive under the conditions you're facing. He turned to the room. Captain Lawson will be assuming tactical command of Operation Shadowfall. Commander Reynolds will serve as her second. Reynolds stood frozen, processing the sudden shift in command. The other pilots exchanged glances, disbelief written on their faces as they stared at Ava and the flight log. Lieutenant Mills broke the silence. "Ma'am, I apologize for my comments. I'd be honored to offer my position on the tactical team to you." Ava nodded, accepting the apology without hesitation. She moved to the front of the room with natural authority and began redrawing the mission parameters on the whiteboard. "The approach needs to be adjusted to accommodate the valley's unique wind patterns," she said, marking new vectors. "We'll need to shift our formation here and here to account for radar blind spots I've identified from previous missions." The room fell into silence as Ava confidently took charge of the operation. The respect that had been absent just hours before was now present in every eye that watched her lead. The squadron watched in awe as Captain Ava Lawson demonstrated her mastery of the terrain. Enemy capabilities, and tactical approaches, knowledge that could only come from hard-won experience. The way she spoke, with quiet confidence, yet fierce precision, left no room for doubt that she was more than capable. Reynolds, his earlier doubts giving way to respect, moved beside her, willing to contribute his own expertise. "Captain, I have specialized knowledge of the new SAM systems they've deployed," he said, his tone more respectful now. "I'd like to offer my support in planning countermeasures." Ava's response was calm and sincere. "Thank you, Commander," she said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "That would be valuable." As they worked together, revising the mission plan, it became clear how much more likely success was now. The room, filled with once skeptical pilots, had shifted from dismissiveness to deep focus. Admiral Harrison, ever the authority figure, addressed the room once more. Captain Lawson earned her call sign, Phoenix, after being shot down over enemy territory. She survived 3 days in burning wreckage, managed to repair her communication system with damaged parts, and guided rescue teams to her position while evading capture. The Admiral paused, allowing the weight of the words to settle. He looked around at the now attentive room. She doesn't wear her achievements on her sleeve. She carries them in her actions. 2 hours later, the briefing room had transformed entirely. What had started as a routine pre-mission meeting had become an intensive planning session, with Ava at its heart. Digital maps now projected across the walls, showing revised flight paths, adjusted strategies, and contingencies. Pilots huddled in groups, discussing approach vectors and tactical options, their respect for her becoming more apparent by the second. Reynolds worked closely beside Ava, his earlier hostility gone, replaced with a professional focus. These new SAM systems have a targeting vulnerability during their reacquisition cycle, he explained, pointing to specific areas on the map. If we time our countermeasures correctly, we can exploit it. Ava nodded, her mind already racing ahead. Good. That buys us the 7 seconds we need for this turn. She traced a path through a narrow mountain pass. I've been through here before. The radar signature is masked by the iron deposits in these cliffs. But only if you maintain this exact altitude. Lieutenant Mills approached, holding up satellite imagery. Captain, I've analyzed the extraction zone. Your concern about the magnetic anomalies was correct. The latest deep scan shows significant discrepancies compared to standard imaging. The locals call it Ghost Valley, Ava said softly. Instruments get unreliable. You have to fly partly by sight, partly by feel. By feel? One of the younger pilots asked, his voice tinged with confusion. Ava didn't hesitate. The aircraft responds differently to the air currents. You learn to read those responses. She turned to Reynolds, a quiet intensity in her eyes. That's why I was concerned about your original approach. The wind shear at that vector would have been unmanageable. Reynolds studied her revised flight plan, his face hardening as he saw the logic. I see it now. The approach isn't just about avoiding the SAM sites. It's about working with the valley's natural physics. Exactly, Ava said, pointing to a narrow corridor on the map. This is where we lost 2 planes in Operation Blacklight. They tried to force the aircraft through instead of letting the valley guide them. The room fell silent. The reality of her words sinking in. What had initially been dismissed as a mere political appointment was now clear, their best hope for survival lay in Ava's experience. Where did you learn all this? Mills asked, incredulity in his voice. This isn't in any flight manual. Ava's voice was steady and matter-of-fact. Experience, she said simply. And failure. I watched good pilots die trying to fight the mountain instead of working with it. The burned scar on her neck suddenly made sense to everyone in the room. It wasn't just a mark of her survival. It was a testament to the price she had paid for that survival. Admiral Harrison moved to the center of the room, his presence commanding the attention of all. Intelligence reports our assets will be at the extraction point in 18 hours. That gives you limited time for preparation. Captain Lawson will finalize the mission parameters and flight assignments. The Admiral's gaze swept across the room. I want to be clear. This mission is classified beyond the standard protocols. Captain Lawson's presence here. Her background, everything you've learned today, remains strictly confidential. Reynolds spoke up, his voice full of curiosity. Sir, why the secrecy about Captain Lawson's record? The Admiral exchanged a glance with Ava before responding. Special Operations Aviation Detachment operates differently from standard naval aviation. Their pilots maintain low profiles for operational security. Captain Lawson's transfer here is temporary, specifically for this mission. The revelation caused a ripple of surprise through the room. A thought clearly racing through his mind. Sir, with all due respect, the squadron could benefit from Captain Lawson's experience long-term. That's not my decision to make, Commander. Who had been quiet up to this point, asked, yes. Ava's expression remained neutral, but her eyes spoke volumes. I know every inch of that pass. As the briefing concluded, the pilots began to disperse, heading off to prepare their aircraft and equipment. Reynolds stayed behind, studying the mission plans with renewed intensity. Something else, Commander? Ava asked. Turning to face him. Reynolds looked up, as if just realizing something. Why didn't you say anything when you first arrived about who you are, what you've done? Ava took a moment to respond. Her voice calm but filled with the weight of experience. In my experience, Commander, people either believe in your abilities based on superficial markers or they don't believe until they see proof. Either way, the work speaks for itself eventually. I misjudged you, Reynolds admitted quietly. And I allowed others to do the same. It happens, Ava said, gathering her materials. What matters now is getting our people out alive. Reynolds nodded, a genuine respect now in his eyes. For what it's worth, I'd be honored to fly under your command anytime, Captain Phoenix. For the first time since entering the briefing room, Ava allowed herself a slight smile. Let's succeed at this mission first. Then we can discuss future possibilities. As they walked toward the flight deck to begin final preparations, the respect that had been absent just hours earlier was now palpable. Pilots nodded deferentially as Ava passed. Crew members who had previously ignored her now stood straighter in her presence. Word had spread throughout the carrier, the mysterious Captain Lawson was actually Phoenix. A pilot whose exploits were legendary among those with high enough clearance to know them. The flight deck of the USS Intrepid buzzed with pre-mission activity as dawn broke over the Persian Gulf. Maintenance crews performed final checks on the FA-18E Super Hornets while pilots conducted their walkarounds. The mission that had seemed routine just hours earlier now carried a weight of expectation and newfound respect. Captain Ava Lawson stood by her assigned aircraft, reviewing her checklist with methodical precision. Her flight suit now bore a single patch hastily sewn on after the briefing, identifying her as mission commander. The rest of her uniform remained unadorned, a stark contrast to the decorated suits of the squadron pilots around her. Reynolds approached, his helmet tucked under his arm. "Aircraft is prepped to your specifications, Captain. Weather report confirms your wind pattern predictions." "Thank you, Commander," Ava replied, making a final notation in her log. "Any word from intelligence about our extraction targets?" "Still on schedule. They'll reach the rendezvous point within the designated window." Ava nodded, closing her log. The morning sun caught the burned scar on her neck, highlighting its texture against her skin. Reynolds found himself staring at it before quickly catching himself. "Something on your mind, Commander?" Ava asked without looking up. Reynolds hesitated. "The blacklight operation. You were the sole survivor from the lead team?" "Yes," Ava responded matter-of-factly. "We lost 2 aircraft in the Widowmaker. One pilot ejected but didn't survive the terrain. The other went down with his plane, and you crashed as well. Engine failure. After taking SAM damage, I managed to put the aircraft down in a somewhat controlled crash. Caught fire immediately after impact." She touched the scar briefly before dropping her hand. "I had 3 days alone before extraction was possible." Reynolds absorbed this, then asked quietly, "And now you're willingly flying back into the same valley?" "The mission requires it." She met his eyes directly. "Unless you prefer to take point through the Widowmaker." "No," Reynolds said quickly. "Your plan is sound. Your experience is invaluable." A young female maintenance technician approached cautiously. "Captain Lawson, final systems check is complete. Aircraft is ready." "Thank you, Specialist," Ava replied. The technician hesitated, then spoke in a lower voice. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say what you're doing means a lot to some of us here." Ava smiled slightly. "Do your job well. That's what matters." Ava understood the unspoken message in the technician's eyes. In the male-dominated world of naval aviation, her presence as a combat-proven female pilot carried significance beyond just the mission. It wasn't just about flying, it was about breaking barriers. But Ava wasn't there for praise. She was here to lead and to get the job done. "Do your job well," she said simply. "That's what matters." The technician nodded and moved away. Ava didn't need anyone's validation. She had a mission to focus on, and that was all that mattered. Reynolds watched the exchange with a newfound awareness. "I never considered how it might be," he admitted. "Always being the only one." Ava glanced at him. "I don't think about it. The sky doesn't care about gender. Neither do missiles." Her words hit Reynolds harder than he expected. It was a simple truth, but it resonated deeply. She wasn't here to prove anything about gender, she was here to survive, lead, and succeed. Lieutenant Mills walked up, holding out a squadron patch with a subtle phoenix emblem incorporated into the Jolly Rogers design. "Captain, the squadron wanted to give you something before wheels up. We didn't know who you were, but we had it updated after this morning's briefing." Ava took the patch and attached it to her flight suit. "Thank you, Lieutenant. It's an honor to fly with Jolly Rogers today." The pilots gathered for the final briefing. What would have normally been Reynolds' moment to lead was now clearly Ava's. She moved quickly, discussing last-minute details and contingencies with precision. "Remember, communication discipline is critical once we enter the valley," Ava said. "The enemy has sophisticated signal detection." As Ava climbed into her cockpit, Admiral Harrison appeared on the flight deck, walking toward her with a stern expression. He stood at attention. "Captain, command just received confirmation," he said. "Our intelligence assets are under immediate threat. The extraction window has moved up by 2 hours." Ava didn't hesitate. "Understood, sir. We'll adjust accordingly." The Admiral's expression grew graver. "The enemy knows we're coming, Phoenix. They've increased air defenses throughout the valley." Ava's voice was steady. "With all due respect, sir. They were expecting us the last 7 times I flew through that valley too." The Admiral's lips curved into a small smile. "Bring them home, Captain. And bring yourself home too. The Navy needs pilots like you." "We'll get it done, sir," Ava replied firmly. The Admiral stepped back and saluted. Ava returned the salute before securing her helmet and canopy. The roar of engines filled the flight deck as the squadron prepared for launch. Reynolds' voice crackled over the private channel. "Phoenix, Maverick. Ready when you are." "Roger that, Maverick. Let's fly." One by one, the Super Hornets launched from the carrier, flying in the precise formation Ava had specified. She took the lead position as mission commander, with Reynolds and Mills flanking her. The squadron climbed to cruising altitude, the vast Persian Gulf slowly giving way to the rugged coastline and the mountain range ahead. The peaks of the KMA range rose like towering sentinels. "Commence radio discipline now. Follow my lead precisely," Ava ordered as they approached the first waypoint. The formation descended toward the valley entrance, the aircraft's sensors already warning of radar sweeps. Ava led them into the first evasive maneuver, hugging the terrain with practiced precision. The Korma Valley opened before them, a twisting corridor of sheer rock walls and dangerous updrafts. As expected, the turbulence hit them immediately, but Ava kept her hands steady on the controls, making subtle adjustments to keep her fighter on track. Behind her, the squadron followed in perfect formation, trusting her completely. 20 minutes into the valley, the first missile warning sounded. Surface-to-air radar locked onto the trailing aircraft. Without breaking radio silence, Ava banked sharply, leading the formation into a defensive maneuver. The valley's topography shielded them from the missile lock. As they neared the Widowmaker, the narrowest, most dangerous part of the valley, Ava's breathing remained steady. This was the place where she had crashed years ago. She had seen friends fall here. But she kept the memories at bay, focusing on the mission ahead. The Widowmaker loomed ahead. A gap between sheer cliffs. To navigate it, perfect timing, angle, and speed were required. Too fast, and they'd crash into the rocks. Too slow, and the updrafts would throw them off course. Ava led the squadron through the gap, turbulence intensifying. Warning alarms blared as the instruments fluctuated wildly. When they emerged from the Widowmaker into the wider section of the valley, a collective breath seemed to release from the formation. They had made it through the most dangerous part. Mission accomplished. The landing on the USS Intrepid was met with quiet celebration. The extracted assets were escorted below for debriefing, while the pilots went through their post-flight procedures. Admiral Harrison waited on the flight deck as Ava climbed down from her aircraft. "Perfect execution, Captain. Not a single casualty or damage report." "The squadron performed admirably, sir," Ava replied. The Admiral looked at the pilots nearby, their expressions mixing exhaustion and newfound respect. "Your temporary assignment with Jolly Rogers has been extended, Captain Lawson, if you're amenable, of course." Ava removed her helmet, the wind catching her hair. "Extended, sir. We need more squadron leaders with your experience," he said. "This squadron could benefit from your approach to command." Reynolds stepped forward. "The squadron would be honored, Captain." Ava glanced at the pilots who had doubted her just hours ago. Now they stood at attention, waiting for her decision. "I accept the assignment, Admiral. Thank you for the opportunity. Reynolds extended his hand with a smile. Welcome to the Jolly Rogers. Ava's journey highlights the strength needed to succeed in a world that often overlooks you. In a male-dominated field like aviation, her leadership and resilience show that respect should never depend on gender. Her powerful statement, "The sky doesn't care about gender. Neither do missiles,"